This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to New York Island.
Welcome, William. Hello. It's
Joann.
Friday, September 27th. The
Wow.
election is around the corner and people have started voting.
How many days?
I don't know. I'm not, it's like about 40 or under 40 now.
Just barely over a month. Okay, so here's to you, Joann.
Here's to you.
The people. Please stay with us for a while. I think it might be interesting this evening.
Very interesting, because I think we talked about this and I'm excited. I'll tell you why. Because this evening we're going to turn things on its head a little bit, because we've been kind of like evaluating the candidates and evaluating things going on, and that's all well and good. But I think each of us has to kind of put the shoe on the other foot for a minute and say, well, what would I do if I were in the White House? I mean, because it's really easy to criticize, and it's actually, I think it's the hardest job in the world, frankly. So I think it's interesting for us to kind of challenge ourselves. So I'm going to challenge you today, because of the two of us and of many people I've met, you're the only person I know who's actually run for president. You've done it way back in 1979. So you're going to be the one we're going to ask the questions of tonight. But
of course, my memory was a bit better that 43 years ago or so. Wow, that long. Okay, go for it. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right, so I want to pick.
I have my teleprompter here,
Yeah, right. No teleprompter, right?
I have an earbud. I have an earbud in to tell me the answers.
This is my teleprompter right here.
All right.
So I want to ask you, since this seems to be the top issue that I think people are going to vote on, whether right or wrong, my opinion, but but the economy. So I'd like to talk tonight realistically. So William J. Cox, if you were elected on November 5th this year, and you were going to take office, what would be your policies? What would be the things you would move forward on in terms of the economy?
Well, the first thing is this, and that is to have a fair taxation system. And in our conversations going back into last April, Joann, our most popular one was when we talked about taxation. And the taxation that I propose as a policy is that instead of taxing income, as we've been doing since the Civil War, that we move it into the 21st century and we just simply tax the movement of money. Just a tiny ka-ching, 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 ka-ching on the movement of money. And the effect of that would be to entirely lift the burden of taxation as it exists today from the people, the working people and small business owners of this country, up, and it would be paid for by those who move money. So you have large corporations and financial institutions, and every day they just move.
And individuals too.
And wealthy individuals. So personally,
but we also move money, don't we? I mean, what do you mean by moving money?
Okay, so at the end of the year, everybody, the government, you can't be a fool. So the government would collect, you'd file the same thing you do now. Instead of an income tax, you would file a very simple postcard return of what you received that year and what went into savings and what you gave away and to whom you gave it away to. And the rest would be taxed at that same little less than 5%. Of that would be paid for essentially by the corporations and the financial institutions. That was where that little tiny percentage would be applied. But on the personal income of someone who earns $100,000 a year, let's say, that would be the total tax from the government.
Okay. Just so I'm understanding. So I get a salary. I'm a salaried person. I'm a working Joe. I have my paycheck that I get. So I'm not being taxed on that. I'm being taxed on.
Well, yes, you are. I mean, probably in a realistic taxing system, you would still have withholding. in a way, and small business owners will still have to file quarterly returns and so forth. But what you do is that you just simply reflect how much money have you received and what you did with the money. And if you can show that you gave it away to someone, well, then that person has received that money. So that's money they have received in a way. But or you put it into a savings, federally protected savings account somewhere, and it's just sitting there gathering interest. That's fine. It's not going to be taxed. But the rest of it you spent. Basically, that was your lifestyle. You were taxed on what you have used of the money that you received, other than what you've saved and what you've given away to someone else. And that could be whether it's given away to your aunt, your aunt, or to a
So I'm not taxed on what I've used out of my salary.
Yeah. No. What I'm saying is you are taxed on exactly what you use out of your salary. That the tax is on what you use. It's the exemption.
So you're not taxed on what you put aside to save.
No, that's the encouraged savings. What we want is a lot of savings.
So I'm not taxed on what I put aside to save, and I'm not taxed on what I've given. But what if I pay my my kids' tuition?
However you spend it, it doesn't matter. It's up to you however you spend it. But the presumption is that it's spent, unless it's one of those exemptions. The presumption is that it's spent. You're either saving it, you're giving it away, or you're spending it. And that.
So I get taxed on what I spend. I get taxed on what I spend, and what's the percentage I'm taxed on what I spend?
2%. 1.8%. I mean, it's like, imagine
the
billions of dollars that move through the financial institutions every day. Billions and billions and billions of dollars. I mean, the movement of money through the Chicago Trade Center up there could fund the entire government for the year, just on that. So you solve the taxation problem. And what you do, then we talk about all the programs and all the things we want to do. We get away from how you're going to pay for it. Because what you do is you start off, and the biggest question Congress has is, as they're setting the tax for the year, is what percentage is it going to be this year? Is it going to be 1.8% or 1.9%? It's like a big thing because it'll raise a lot of money. The differences will be, and so then you can exactly say, okay, then you have a government by performance where you're going to say this is what we need to do for the people of this country. And this is what it's going to cost. So therefore, we'll set the budget right here, and you balance the books every year. You balance the books. You get the banks out of it. In fact, the government takes over and it has the United States Bank, and you have the Bank of the United States, and you get completely out of the other business. But that's another story. But the other thing, before we leave taxation, real quickly, and this is also to deal with the economy. This is how you deal with offshoring all of our business and so forth. Because when you have a corporation that employs, you have a 100% American-owned, the citizen-owned corporation that has 100% American, people working for it here in America.
Right.
They don't pay a tax on their payroll. The money just goes right through, because it is going to be taxed when it's spent over here by the people of the United States who are receiving this money right through for them and their payroll to be spent. That way, that corporations are freed of that great burden of taxation. Wow. And then on the contrary, to if you have a foreign corporation, a Japanese corporation or a German corporation or any other country corporation here in America, they're going to have to pay to the extent that they're not employing American citizens, they're going to have to pay a tax on all of their payroll. So
that's interesting. So that's a way of doing tariffs that doesn't hurt the American consumer.
Get rid of the tariffs entirely.
That's brilliant.
Eliminate tariffs entirely, because when goods come into the country, boom, that's the first transaction. Ka-ching, 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 as they come in. But it's on the movement of money. It's on the movement of goods, and it's like it's It's just an entirely different way of dealing with taxation, and also by having policy, a very few policy applications on it, you keep it very simple. It's just a postcard every year. This is it. Almost small businesses could almost operate the same thing, but who gets taxed big time are the corporations. Ask me the second question. What is the second thing you will do on the day you're president?
Well, I'm still fascinated by point one.
Well,
I
because
don't even want to leave it
you
yet.
have to move along. You have to go out. You have dinner, guests waiting.
Okay.
Cheers.
Okay, William. I might circle back on that, but
Okay.
we're gonna play ball in the next. I'm gonna bat you. I'm serving another ball here. What's the second thing you would do on day one, William?
And that is to make sure that the world understands that corporations are robots. They are not people. They are robots. We've given them entirely in lifetime. They live for eternity, and they make war in order to sell products. And so the first thing, the second thing I would do, and you'd say, well, doesn't it require a constitutional amendment to
Yeah, is this economics, or are
change
now we
this?
moving into
Yeah,
law?
but because this
Policy.
has to do with the economy, with dealing with corporations, but that you, as president, you do have the power to make sure that a case is quickly brought before the Supreme Court of the United States, right? Present Supreme Court sitting there as presently constituted, with the question, does this corporation have constitutional rights?
But didn't we already? But
No,
okay,
but
there's
I'm
going to challenge you.
Okay, but see, there's a case back there, way back in the time when a county tried to tax the railroad that was going through the county, and they took it up and said, "Oh no, we have, it's a due process of law," but the court didn't even decide it on that issue. A court clerk just put it into the title of the case. It's not even the original law. Is not really the law. It's just a clerical error that has been carried forward, certainly by corporations and all their lawyers. They're not about to give up this power. But the first thing I would do is to challenge this court that we have, who say they are originalist. And I would plead the case myself. I would go down and activate my license and get someone to stand there beside me and argue this case myself, and say, where in this Constitution is to say that corporations have rights, or as persons?
What about Citizens
It's
United?
it's not that they just made it all up. It's all fictional creations to benefit the corporate masters.
It's just hard to imagine that this court would do that. But you're right. You're
No.
right to call them on the carpet and say,
So-
if you're originalists
and
and Gorsuch and all these other people,
Yeah. Well, of course, I would walk out and stand on the steps of that court and say that, the first thing we really need to do is to get this court organized properly, because that can be done also without a constitutional amendment. That court, just because it has 9 members sitting there today, has not always had 9 members. It has.
I know.
It can be organized differently just simply by acts of Congress. You can have two branches of the Supreme Court, one hearing civil cases, one hearing criminal cases. There's all kinds of ways to organize the Supreme Court. In fact, didn't we talk about that? We have a conversation.
We did, and that was a really good one.
Yeah.
That was a really good one.
Well, anyway,
Yeah.
that's the second thing I would do. But then go ahead. And what would be the third thing?
So I want to challenge that, though. I just want to add this. So in this speculative fiction that we are engaged in at the moment, if you look at your watch, we're not done yet. So
No, I'm not. I'm worried about you.
Oh no, I'm not. I've got dinner plans at 7:30. I'll
Okay.
get there. So in this speculative fiction we are engaged in, part of the parameters of this scenario are that you are literally the person who's being elected on November 5th in 2024. So you're being elected into the reality that whoever gets elected is going to have. So
exactly today,
the Congress
Okay.
that they're going to have and the court that they're going to have.
And facing all of that, what is required is a recognition of the nature of the presidency as being one of making policy. making good policy and creating an organization that can effectuate that policy. And that would be what I would dedicate myself to,
I like
because
that.
these are policies we're now articulating. These aren't giveaway programs for this much, for welfare families or this or what, in terms of whether, depending on whether you're talking about personal welfare or corporate welfare, whichever way is being given. But this is real policies. These are the overall policies that we're going to, now we may have to come up with a lot of legislation perhaps to effectuate, some of this, but that would be our overall guiding policies for the government that would be formed. And see, that's another question as to what kind of government
Oh, listen,
one
look
form.
at you. Look at you. Now I'm moving on to point 3, which you apparently want me to do. Moving on to point 3. So okay, we got taxation. We got taxation. We've got challenging corporate personhood.
Right.
Yep. So what is numero tres here in terms of what you would do?
War and
Now, these are all, I guess these are all, we're broadly talking about the economy, folks. It's not only,
yeah, that's right. That's right. I can't get off. Well, of course, the economy as it relates to war is that day one, you renounce the concept of war against people and nations, and you follow a police approach to dictators, petty dictators who are that's another
not the
question.
economy.
Except that we are wasting. How are we going to pay for this economy stuff if we're also paying for this stupid wars? And the way to end those wars is to renounce war and declare peace and get on, with discussions with, with our neighbors and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Yeah, we're not stupid. I mean, you and I both, are far too.
Oh, don't say it.
Yeah,
But realistic. No, but let me ask you this. So, okay, let's set that aside with the, our military industrial complex and all that stuff. Assuming that piece of things didn't change, okay, the budget that we currently have, the income that we currently, I want to go back to point 1 that you had. I know we got point 3, but point 1, I want to go back. So you're saying that just by taxing the movement of money the way that you propose,
right,
we would cover enough for our budget as it is currently constituted, even with the military industrial complex piece of our budget.
Even as it exists today, times 3. I mean, you just go kind of tiny ka-ching, ka-ching. I mean, that is all assuming that we continue to have a prospering world economy in a way. I mean, overall. I mean,
right, because
but
there
of course,
will be
any
less
system of taxation is going to be dependent on that.
Right, that's true too, as we know in California, because we've got a serious deficit at the moment.
Now, what could we
learn?
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead, go. Let's ask, please.
No, what comes to my mind is that we really need to do something about the potholes in the United States highways. And so what we need to do is to have a policy by which we are going to energize the highways of America so that you can get on the highway, the freeway in California and go visit your Aunt Matilda in New York City, freeway all the way, just by pulling onto it. And it's all powered by solar energy from outer space. We could do that in 10 years. We could begin to open up we have to take this whole interstate freeway system we have, kind of like relayer it with more concrete and also layer in electrical induction coils to power our cars along. And all of this is achievable. And Musk, God love him, has shown us that you can send rockets up and bring them down. And that's one of the biggest problems of putting this network into space to provide solar energy from outer space 24/7 every day. Freeways every way. That's something we could do for America, folks.
With no emissions.
And think of all of the engineers that would be out of work in the military industrial complex, suddenly employment doing exactly what we're talking about. Putting up all of these rockets in order to collect energy, and to energize our highways, and to do this all over the world, and stop making stupid war.
Okay,
Correct.
I mean, I mean, not being an engineer, not being much of anything useful, actually. I look at this whole idea of this superhighway from coast to coast that's going to be, and it feels a little bit fantastical, but I'm willing to suspend disbelief in our where we're
But
at.
when you pick up your toothbrush from your electric charger, that it just sits there on the plastic, and you pick it up and it's always charged, that's induction. That's the induction energy. It's the same thing on the highways. You don't have hot, amperage flowing underneath the highway in the rain. It's fairly off the shelf. Everything I've talked about is really off the shelf. Today's technology could be done. Just like we went to the moon in 10 years, we could do this. We could have the beginning. Really, you couldn't do the whole system in 10 years, but you could have the beginnings of it. And you would have full employment all through the country because of it. People would have money. There would be jobs. Good paying
Yeah,
jobs.
especially in
You'd have good paying jobs that that really work their way down. It's there is a trickle economy in a way. It's not a trickle
no,
economy,
I know.
but that's the reality of a free market economy, which is a good thing.
And it would be actually all the quote flyover country of this country, all the flyover states would it be getting in such a scenario would be getting a lot of
Absolutely.
jobs.
They right straight through all the way.
Fascinating. Okay. But these are all, so I like this. This is all. So can I pause and make an observation?
Sure.
I know we probably have other things on our list you want to get to. I'm sure you got them on. But I want to just I want to just note something for a minute. Because I read an interesting article, because I got to have my little media critique. And basically there was a good it was the New York Times, but it was basically talking about Kamala Harris, how she really doesn't do televised one-on-one interviews very well, and dissecting this last interview she had with MSNBC. She and I noticed this, and this might be the beginning of the tarnishing of the whole joy thing, which is that she doesn't get into policy and talk. I mean, she's explained things in more depth, and she will only go this far, and she sticks to her, and she goes back. And so I guess what I'm saying is what we're trying to do right now, which is really kind of dig into things and really have an exchange. That's what's kind of frustrating for me in this, watching this whole political theater we have right now, because even though, and it won't shock you, I'm going to be voting for Kamala Harris because of, the other options there, but I still find myself dissatisfied. It's like eating a dinner with no nutrition, watching that type of exchange. And so that's where I feel, that's why I just wanted to point that out in this exchange, because it's like you get challenged, you have to deepen what you're saying. I just want to note that there's a different type of communication that happens. So anyway, so that's just what I wanted to say about that. And I'm happy to go on to your next point unless you had something you wanted to say about that.
We're still talking about the economy, right?
Well, I mean,
no, okay. We want to talk about the economy, and
we are,
and one of the greatest burdens on this economy today represents one of the greatest failures of our government. For our young people going back 40 years now or so, who have been forced to borrow money to go to college, to educate themselves in order to perform work for the corporations and to benefit our economy, and to force them to carry this burden of debt forever and forever and forever, almost, I know that the Biden administration has tried to take some steps,
and they have. He needs some credit for
that. But that should be entirely just absorbed. All of these corporations, these are corporation financial institutions, that could be, just like you have to seize land for public domain to put a road through, you could just seize all of that debt as a public domain, and you could just, you could put it, to its true value as to what that debt really is valued at, and just absorb that by the government. Freed that money suddenly is all in the economy. All of that money that was going to be spent on all of those student loans throughout this economy is suddenly available and is being spent throughout the country.
I think from a purely, I totally respect what you're saying from a purely like an equational, like looking at it from a purely top, what we're doing, right? But since we
Our
also,
fantasy of the hour.
that's fine. But I also have to say, since we're talking about speculative fiction and our fantasy of the hour, I just want to say, I get what you're saying, that freeze it up in the economy, take it on, but there's something in me that has a bit of a resistance to that, as somebody who did pay off all of their debt.
Right.
And actually, I just want to say the other issue with that is, what are we doing to stop the educational industrial complex, and why is tuition so high? Like, I really feel like, okay, we're going, so all of a sudden the government's going to take all this debt on and we're all going to pay it. First of all, some people made some bad educational decisions and went to school for things, whatever. Okay, we're getting that, but putting all that aside, what are we doing to stop this? Like, how much the tuition is charged at these universities, which is totally ridiculous.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Oh, good.
That was like 0.5, 4 or 5, 6 is education.
Here we go. I served that up for you. I just served it up.
Perfect timing, because I'm at the stage where I'll forget it. And when I'm looking at this tomorrow morning, I say, oh shoot, we didn't even talk about that. But anyway, education, not just whether we should get rid of the Department of Education. The Department of Education should be made just like West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy, the Coast Guard Academy, and so forth, where you'd have the education academy, and that education itself be made one of the primary focuses of government, and that you have this education academy that would set policy throughout the country for free education, so that people wouldn't feel the need to pay we're back on the economy, right? To pay for private schooling and so forth, or other kinds of schooling, that they could fully trust our great public school education system, as George Washington wanted us. It would also have the University of the United States, and that the University of the United States would be by congressional appointments, just like West Point and Anatomy and Annapolis, and that education itself be brought to the forefront of our country's effort, because that is the future. I mean, that is what defines us as human beings, is our ability to learn something and to teach it, and that it is carried forward. And that when you look at this magnificent worldwide society that we put together, it's all about education, period. It is bottom line important. So, I mean, it took us 6 to get to it, but we have to deal with these other things first. But it can, and that can be dealt with. We could have the greatest public education system in the world, the richest public education system in the world, paid for by this taxation.
Okay, so it sounds lovely. But let me just go back to the taxation piece. I just want to confirm. I mean, I just want to say that I'm kind of questioning a little bit about the numbers. Okay, so there's a lot you're saying that's building the cross country highway with the coils,
all of this stuff we could pay for,
and free education for everybody, and
all of this we could pay for.
So,
because the money keeps circulating. Because the money keeps circulating. That's exactly the story of China's present prosperity. It's not just that they're selling us a lot of stuff and bringing money back to their country. What they are doing is they are investing in their country. They have this wonderful highway system, these wonderful high-speed rail systems. They are putting money right back into their economy, which is exactly what we could.
Is their economy in a little bit of a problem at the moment?
Well, of course, you can't have more than 1 billion people. Look at, I mean, any country, that has that many people is going to have real economic problems, and especially since you no longer have the evils of communism central control over the economy in terms of factoring out the factories and all of the stuff that you have under the Soviet Union. You have something like that in that the army, the People's Army, controls many of these factories and many of these operations as well. And so they are not necessarily paternalistic in the manner in which they handle their workers, or whatever.
Mhm.
There are an awful lot of problems there, but they are still really distributing the wealth. It's an amazing thing when you look at the levels of education they've achieved, and of course, one of their first decisions was to send students to America, to be educated and bring them
But
home.
see, then if they're sending them here to be educated, then that can't mean that our educational system's so bad.
Well, it's not so bad, but
it's just expensive.
But it is terribly expensive. I mean, by the time
It's absurd.
it's one thing, to get your basic bachelor's degree, which used to be like the high school education.
Right.
Back in my day, by golly, if you got your high school, you got out of high school before you went to work in the fields, you were doing pretty good. But no, today a bachelor's degree, not only just to get a job,
Third entry.
but comprehend the incredible store of knowledge that has been accumulated in the last 100 years or so. I mean, it requires at least a bachelor's degree, a college education, not only to learn that, but to also learn the principles of a free society. I mean, civics, should be a part of that education. And back on the economy, all of this should be free through the community college level. The free public education should be extended to 14 years, essentially, throughout the country. You have that extra 2 years for trade training, for whatever reason, or for prep training to go to university or whatever. Now, for anyone who, when you're 16 years old, you could sign up through the education department for your year of public service upon graduation from high school. And you could go out and you could do a year of valuable public service, not just picking up trash somewhere, but really something you have planned. You've sat with a counselor and you've worked out where you're going to do your free public service. You go do it and you come back and you have your bachelor's degree paid for. It's just free. It's not freely given to you, but by doing a year of free public service to your community, or to service, to help dig a well in Africa, or whatever, your service is going to be, you get a free year's education. If you give 2 years, you got your master's degree, and so forth. It's a way of learning, because especially if you look at that year as being a gap year, in a way of really going out into the world and seeing what the world's all about and how their people are in other places and what their values.
But not just traveling around, like
no,
having
not traveling, but
something.
a job. You have to go do work, just like what you.
Right.
Like what could you have used some of these young people in Moldova or in?
Well, there was Peace Corps in Moldova.
Yeah,
they had Peace Corps there. They were doing good stuff. Yeah. I mean, I thought that was good.
Well,
but
it's like a Peace Corps. I mean,
yeah.
And certainly an adaptation could make it even easier to do these things on day one.
The day one thing is ridiculous. It's like on day one, you're getting in your suit after you're just figuring out where your pens are at the Oval Office. I mean, the whole day one thing is kind of ridiculous. But yes, initial top priorities. Let's call it that.
Yeah. Well, we had a discussion about how the government would be organized, if you remember, and that would be to appoint 3 women, right?
Yes.
There would be, hopefully your vice president would be a woman, and she would be in the Senate and with the responsibility of handling all legislation, all legislation, both nationally and in the states, to handle the entire government's agenda out in the states, which is where the battleground is today. This is where, so many rights are being rolled back throughout the states through state legislatures, because they are being influenced so directly by corporations and corporate.
Right.
And so anyway, that's another story. And an assistant president for foreign affairs, and an assistant president for local affairs. And
But what about a woman being president?
you assemble a meeting of your policymakers every morning, and over coffee you discuss the policies of the day, and that's it.
With
Yeah.
some crumpets?
With crumpets.
That would be tea. That would be tea then.
But
I mean, yeah.
No, I mean, I'm serious. That's the way government should be. It has to be organized today. I mean, the president still has to control the military, have direct control of the military, the intelligence agencies, and the justice systems. I mean,
Right.
those are things that you cannot, delegate. Those are non-delegable powers. But all this other stuff, I mean, that goes on, like, well, whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, so okay. So it's a lot to absorb, but it's a completely, yeah, it's definitely at 6:40. I know. So I guess my last question is there anything else that's in this top bucket of priorities at the beginning, or is it like starting from taxation, getting through to education? That's where that would be your first sort of like flush of activity.
Well, yeah, that's your first 100 days. That's your
Okay.
first 100 days, and
There are going to be a lot of accountants out of work. The CPAs.
well, yeah, but see, they'll find they're talented people. They will find other employment. I mean, dealing with numbers is the future. I mean, that's part of why I'm so exuberant. This evening is my work with numbers has been really going well. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, maybe that work can help with laying the coils across the country or some other.
Let's see, what else might, well, I guess the other policy that would be is that if I had my way, and we had this magnificent education system throughout the country. And instead of educating our children in bungalows, we really build them nice schools, and chiseled above the entrance of every educational facility in this country, there would be just the word tolerance. And that is our evolution toward tolerance, which brings me to one last thing: guns and gun violence. We of course.
We've talked about that.
We've talked about that, and that is that there's a whole way of dealing with that, so that that people who have guns can voluntarily become a part of their state militia, as the Constitution envisioned, and they register all of their guns. They prove their competence with their guns. They have, they're essentially not licensed, but they are enrolled as and demonstrate their competence to be militia members, competence with their weapons, and then they have free insurance, liability insurance, paid for. And all of this, the training and all of this paid for by a slight tax on all gun violence, whether it is the sale of guns, the sale of ammunition, or violent video games or movies or shows that show violence. There's a tax on those that pays for the education that is going to have to be done to deal with this horrible slaughter of gun violence in this country. And it can be dealt with. The other thing I proposed is that within every community, that people have a place and a way to voluntarily give up their guns, that they've been sold. See, this is what has happened: is they've been sold that they need these guns for protection by these corporations that are selling guns and ammunition. And they are powerful, and that's who actually funds the NRA. That's who's compelling all these people to live in fear that they need these weapons, that they have a way to give them up. And that is, before every public building in this country, there'll be a monument built of surrendered weapons, not just guns, but knives and all of these weapons of violence, that they be made into these magnificent sculptures that can just be laid there over the years to rust away as people would walk by, and the children would say, "What is that, Mommy?" And that's what, once upon a time, people had those to kill other people. This is not a fantasy, Joann. This is not a fantasy. We
It's
we can
compelling. I
live
mean,
this. We can live this. We have the
it's com
power to do this.
I like what you said about JFK saying in 10 years we have man on the moon and then it happened. You know, I like the idea of that sort of vision and that sort of boldness. And I think that has energy to it. And I think that's something that's lacking in the current campaign with some of the proposals and stuff. To me, it doesn't, it's not taking hold at this point because it doesn't have that vision to it. But regardless, I mean, I think that what I think that empowers people and I think it energizes them, you know, whether all those things are achievable or not. And I mean, I trust, I know. So I'm just saying, I don't know if they're all, but it has a boldness has a kind of energy to it that effectuates things beyond what careful sort of rhetoric does.
Well,
So
it takes energy. What it is that, okay, the energy in making something happen isn't just that you are putting energy into it. You can jump up and down and flap your arms and expend an awful lot of energy. But the energy, what it really means is that you are planning, that you are thoughtfully planning things, and you try to do
that's
it,
what policy is.
and you try to do it ahead of time. So then when something happens, you have a policy in place. That was what I did as you know, when I wrote the policy manual of the Los Angeles Police Department, we were writing policy for police officers out in the street so that when something happens, all of a sudden they have a policy to deal with it. They can deviate from the policy, you know, under the circumstances.
Right.
But it's up to them to justify the deviation. In our wisdom, in a way, examining 100 of these cases, we've decided that under these conditions, you never let the hostage be taken from your presence, even if you have to start shooting. You know,
Right. And the thing is, having that kind of structure in place of a policy, having that sort of framework gives people, I can just think about my own work with my, you know, people who work for me. Like setting policies and procedures in place gives them their own comfortability in their own job.
Right.
So that as things arise, they feel like they understand where the outlines are of what they need to decide and what they need to do. If something isn't written down, it makes people nervous and anxious that they're not going to have what they need to make the decisions in the moment that they need to make when things occur.
Well,
and that's really what policy is about.
It's the exact opposite of just being reactive, of saying,
Right.
okay, you're fired. Okay, hire someone else. You're fired. And then that, you know,
Like
not,
a certain candidate.
you know, or of trusting, you know, or that I'm going to organize a government of having okay, like a certain candidate recently, after having served as president, saying he was going to get rid of Obamacare, never came up with a policy whatsoever, and is now again running and will not
As
articulate
the concepts of a plan.
But what? No, he says he will get his experts in and they will come up with a plan. But that is his job in a way to have that policy and a plan. And you know, in a way, that's the one thing that maybe did we talk about this, that there be free healthcare in this country. Just absolutely as a matter of right. Just as a matter of right. And that it be provided, not, you know, you can't be stupid about this. You don't really want civil service employees totally, you know, running hospitals in a way. But you can, you know, I'm a member of Kaiser. I've been a member of Kaiser for 40 years. You know, it's like a great system of nonprofit healthcare. You could have competing nonprofit healthcare centers, you know, around the country. That way they can work, you know, and learn from each other in competition. But the concept is that everybody in this country, just like Medicare for all, in a way, I mean, one way of looking at it.
But you know, would
but,
you have?
but
But would you have the same? I mean, we all love to hate big pharma, but bottom line is they do the research and development to develop things.
much
And
of
I
it,
don't know that in the system you're
much of it
describing,
paid
you'd
for
still
by
have that.
government grants. Much of it paid for by government grants, and also which then they patent and make us pay for. But no, I think that healthcare should be just like education. You should have a national health academy, government, you know, congressional appointees who go there, that they develop policy, that they develop the real standards for operating, you know, hospitals and healthcare systems, and that they have encourage the latest research and development and whether it be medicines, or surgical techniques or whatever that we could easily have at less cost than we are presently paying today, the world's greatest healthcare system.
So without the profit incentive,
Without the
you still
profit,
you
if the
still
profit,
think that the degree of sort of ingenuity and innovation and what is it I'm looking for? Like world leading sort of drugs and everything would be developed. I'm not saying I like the system, but I do understand that the profit incentive drives a lot of the research and development and the discovery of new medications. I mean,
what you're really saying is that money gets spent, whether, corporations are budgeting money spent for research and development so that they can hold the patents on it. Or what I was just saying is that a lot of this is paid for by government research and so forth, which is then patented by corporations and individuals to make everyone else pay for what we already paid for in terms of the development. But again, if we elevate healthcare to the same level as we do education, as we're talking about this, we could still pay for it with what we're paying today. But even still, if it were to cost more, we have the taxation that just allows us just to turn up the dial just slightly, not on us, the working people and the hardworking business owners in this country, but the robotic corporations. Whether they no matter what they manufacture, or if they just play in the casino, the money casino, the banks, they're corporate robots that play in money and play in people's lives.
I don't disagree, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate on one thing though, which is okay, the ka-ching, 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 every transaction or major transaction is being taxed. Isn't that at the end of the day going to be passed along to the consumer? I mean, aren't costs going to go up by a lot?
No.
Aren't prices going to go up by a lot?
No. I don't.
Why not?
Well, okay, I understand what you're saying. In a way, it would be sort of like a value-added tax. And you at every stage of production, each manufacturer or each piece that gets added to it is being taxed because it is a ka-ching, a ka-ching, a ka-ching. And yes, at the end of the day, there would be a taxation, but it would not be significantly greater than today on working people. The burden would still be shifted up and away from the working people if you put it on the movement of money, because our taxation level is going to still be at this minuscule level because we don't deal in millions and billions of dollars.
Well, I know our direct taxation would be at the minuscule level in this scenario, but I'm just saying in terms of the indirect, in terms of the pricing.
Well, perhaps, sure. I mean, but look at the happiest countries on earth. You find them in Scandinavia, and they have super high taxation. It would be nowhere. In other words,
what you pay in higher taxes would be nowhere near what you're paying, and what you pay in higher prices would be nowhere near what you're paying in taxes.
Exactly. Well,
which I agree with.
I suppose I should have really, that should have been my answer. Yeah, yes, you're right.
Oh, I'm glad I got there. William, this has been a quite exuberant conversation.
It has been fun. We're getting near the end. When I went through our last one, I was really I looked at it, we were just sort of sitting there. What else is there to say? It's just sort of hopeless. I mean, my God, these are the candidates. This is the future. What are they going to do? Well, this was fun, and we do have one or two more before the election. Not perhaps more than that,
and we may have to have a debrief after the election.
But it's been interesting. It actually has been. It's it all goes back to, I think, back to my Tuesday night suppers when I worked in Washington D.C. as a young lawyer in the Nixon administration, and it was in his last days, and we would have Tuesday night suppers, and we would all get together and talk about politics and philosophy. Yeah.
Well, it's great. I've enjoyed it, and we've got a few more weeks. We can revisit a lot of these.
Well, a lot of it, and we're running out of time. But again, as always, I want to bring this forward because of all
the voters.
My books are free. Except this, of course. If you want the paperback, you can get it from Amazon at cost. really the voters' Bill of Rights, the transforming America. It's a good history of the country. I think it's as accurate as this old trial lawyer can make, based on the evidence and based on my background is in policy. And also, and that's you can get that for free at williamjohncox.com. And if you're interested in any of the philosophy that we may have hinted at tonight, that's all at mindkind.info. And in terms of the Voters' Bill of Rights and a place to vote on it, it is thevote.io. Thevote.io. So what is it we say each and every week?
As we say, okay, here when the dregs of my wine, we say to the people of the United States, may your consent to be governed never be taken for granted.
That's right. Because you don't have to be satisfied with this government. You really don't. You can have a different government, a different kind of government.
And you don't have to do a revolution either.
No, you don't even need a revolution. We just evolve as an educated, informed people with a vote, because the vote is the evidence of your consent to be governed. I mean, that's what's precious about it, is that you can cast your vote and truly make a difference. And so what should every American voter be asking every single candidate for every elective office in this country today? Do you support our
the
voters'
Bill
of
of Rights?
And why do we have a yellow stripe or a gold stripe on our flag? It's to represent the people of the United States, in addition to the states. So, Joann, thank you very much for a fun evening.
All right. Always.
Right.
I'm off to my
Have fun.
dinner. All right.
Bye-bye.